Today, we're going to be talking about what D&D influencers you should be going to often right here on 20 Sides Weekly. What's up, everybody? I am Matt, the Dungeon Master from the 20 Sides podcast. If you haven't checked us out yet, please do so anywhere you find your podcast. We are a live play podcast, bite-sized episodes, about 30 to 40 minutes each week, releasing every single Monday, and we haven't missed a beat in 43 episodes now. So we are pushing forward as we continue on our first campaign. We also just launched our Patreon, so go on over there if you haven't yet and subscribe. There are lots of goodies there. There's a Patreon-only campaign that you can get access to there. Also, if you haven't hit the subscribe button right here on YouTube, do that. That really helps boost our algorithm. If you leave a comment down below, click like, it'll really help us out. So, on to the episode where we are talking about D&D influencers. So we're going to break it down into who are good for DMs and then who are good for players. We'll start first with our DMs because let's be honest, everybody, they're kind of the most important people out there. I think the first D&D influencer you have to go to is Mike Shea, also known as Sly Flourish. Google Sly Flourish on Twitter. He's got a website where he releases an article every week. He does YouTube videos. He is the go-to as you learn about dungeon mastering, not from the very, very beginning stages, but as you start to work through your dungeon mastering skills, you start asking yourself, okay, how do I get better at DMing? Go to Mike Shea. There's so much rich, good information that he gives you. And the best part about him is it's extremely, extremely practical. And as dungeon masters, we don't do this as a full-time job. We don't do it as a part-time job. And he breaks it down to where you can DM. He's famous for his books, The Lazy Dungeon Master and Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And he breaks it down to where you don't have to spend hours upon hour prepping for your game, and your game still come out, honestly, even better than if you spent all this time. So he does a great job. Check him out. One of his articles really changed the way I think about prepping full-on campaigns. He has a level 1 to 20 outline for a campaign based around Inagu, who is the demon lord of the Knolls. And it goes, the very beginning of it is you as players finding out about a gnoll going through this ritual, or this hyena going through this ritual where he turns into a gnoll. And so he takes you from there all the way to where you eventually fight Inagu and his hordes of gnolls. And so he outlines it, though. He goes from level 1 all the way to level 20 and little snippets of what you would do in each of those levels. And I really took that into account as I began planning out our campaign for 20 Sides. I used that as an outline, and man, has it made a world of difference. I use a lot of what Sly Flourish or Mike Shea talks about. I listen to him every week. Make sure you give him a listen to. Make sure you watch his YouTube videos. Fantastic, fantastic knowledge there. Okay, what else should you do? I think DMs, I think one of the biggest things you can do is watch live plays, but don't watch them for entertainment. Oh, that sounds weird, right? I know it does. But instead of watching it just for entertainment, watch the DM and ask yourself questions as they are DMing. What are they doing? How are they describing things? What are they doing that you really, really like? What are they doing that you don't like, that you want to try to avoid? How are they running combat? How are they tracking an initiative? How are they tracking hit points? The great thing about live plays that we didn't have in the 80s, that they didn't have in the 70s. Heck, I wasn't around in the 70s, even like I was 5 years old in the 80s. So we didn't have that in the 90s, and really we didn't have it in the 2000s, is being able to watch other people play D&D. Go watch Matt Mercer and see how he describes characters, see how he lets players interact with their environment. Go watch Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20 and see how he's able to improv and what he does different than what you do. Take notes with a critical eye. I will challenge you. Get out a notebook. Don't get out your computer. Get out a notebook and a pencil and take notes just like you were back in school, or if you still are in school, I'm sorry, do it again. Take notes and figure out what are they doing that makes it enjoyable for you to watch or for the players at their table to play in their games. How are they different than you? Maybe they're not that different from you. Maybe it's just the players that aren't really interacting and the players aren't the ones engaging. But you can track, hey, how are they dealing with combat? How are they describing combat? How are they keeping combat moving? Because combat is something that can get really stale and boring at the table. So how are they increasing the tension during combat? Asking yourself these questions as they play is going to make you a better DM because you'll be able to write those notes. You'll be able to look at what they're doing. You'll be able to go back and either watch, listen to, or really just think about your game and say, what did I not do that they are doing? Which leads me to one last point for DMs, for influencers. Yourself. How can you influence yourself? If you don't run a podcast and you don't run a live play, there's no way you can watch tape on yourself. Every sporting team watches tape on themselves to get better. Everybody in the industry, no matter what they do in any industry, the best thing you can do is to kind of coach yourself to see where you're struggling, to see what you're not doing effectively, and go do it effectively. How do you do that? You get your phone out, you put it on recorder mode, and boom, you just record the entire episode. It's not an episode for you, but the entire game that you play, and then go back and listen to it. Do you say the word every 2 seconds? That can get annoying and can have really big impact on the immersion of your game. Do you stop every few seconds and have to think of a description? Maybe you need to start writing more descriptions down. Is your combat a slog when you listen back to it and get feedback from your players? You need to improve on that. So listen back to yourself, influence yourself to become a better DM by listening back to it. If you want to get real brave, put your phone up as a camera and record yourself the entire time and go back and listen to and watch how you act, because your movements say a lot about how you play at the game as well. So DMs, those are a few influencers I would recommend to become a much better DM. Players, who do you need to go to? What do you need to do? First off, I'm going to tell you what to stay away from. Try to steer clear as much as you can from TikTok influencers creating character builds. Why do I say that? Because 9 times out of 10, they're just not rules as written. And you're going to get into a situation with your dungeon master where you've built your character around something you've seen on TikTok, something you've seen on Twitter, or potentially on YouTube, maybe more of a YouTube short than a full-on video. But it's just not their rules are wrong. They're getting the rules wrong. And then your DM may know the rules correctly, and then you're screwed because you've built a character around something that can't happen. And now you're 5, 6, 7 levels in, and you're not going to have fun because of that. So first step is steer clear as best as you can from those types of influencers that just want the most max damage at level 6 build, or how do you get 47 sprites to help you out in the campaign? Like, steer clear of that. Let's not try to break the game. Try to immerse yourself in the game. Talk to your DM instead. Number 2, the same thing I told DMs to do, I want the players to do. Because so many times, and you hear the horror stories on Reddit and on Twitter of players telling their DMs, I want you to be more like Matt Mercer. I want you to be more like Brennan Lee Mulligan. I want you to be like the other Matts that are out there. But the DM is saying, well, guess what? You're not the players in those campaigns either. You sit there like a lump on the log. You don't pick up the breadcrumbs I drop. You don't interact with the environment. You don't engage with the story, and you're not immersing yourself in role play. Players, go watch the same live plays that your DM is watching. Watch Critical Role and see how the characters interact with each other. Take notes, not only in your game, but as you're watching these live plays. What are those characters doing that is making a huge difference at the table and making it more fun? I can tell you one thing they're not doing. They're not on their phones. I can tell you another thing they are doing. They're taking notes at the table of the game that's happening in front of them. They are immersing themselves in role play. You'll see so much role play at the table. They're not embarrassed by it. They're not scared to do it. They just go for it. They just go for the role play. They stay in character a lot. They make decisions based on their character, not in some like far off, but this is what my character would do. He would burn the tavern down. Not in that way, but in a good, solid role-playing way that makes the game more interesting for everybody. So do the same things. What are they doing that I like, that I want to replicate myself? What are they doing that I don't want to do for my character or for me as a player? How are they staying engaged at the table? How are they making sure they're involving everybody else? How are they making sure they're not stealing the spotlight? When it is their turn for the spotlight, what are they contributing? All these questions, take notes as they play. Don't just watch it for entertainment, but if you want to become a better D&D player, a better improver at the table, take notes about what they are doing to become better at it. Okay, I think that's enough for 20 Sides Weekly this week. But if you're still here and you haven't subscribed on YouTube, subscribe. If you haven't gone to Spotify or Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it now, if you haven't gone there and listened to our podcast, listen to our podcast, okay? Give us a rating, give us a review. It helps us a ton. Comment here, tell us what you think. Like it. Dislike it. Please don't dislike it. Be nice to us here at 20 Sides. Be nice. All right? Guess what? We'll see you next week right here on 20 Sides Weekly. Peace!